2 syllables from an 8-month-old baby would stop Ellen DeGeneres mid-sentence and change everything. The Ellen DeGeneres Show was in full swing that Tuesday afternoon at the Warner Brothers Studios in Burbank. Ellen bounded onto the stage with her characteristic enthusiasm, wearing her signature crisp white button-down and navy blazer, her infectious smile radiating the kind of warmth that had made her show a sanctuary of positivity for millions of viewers worldwide. The studio audience of 300 people was on their feet, dancing and clapping to the upbeat music that filled the familiar space. "Welcome back, everybody," Ellen called out as the music faded, her voice carrying that perfect blend of energy and genuine care that had defined her hosting style for nearly 2 decades. Behind her, the iconic backdrop displayed its trademark blue sky dotted with white clouds and swaying palm trees, while the famous white chairs with their sleek black wooden bases sat ready for another heartwarming interview. "We're having such an incredible show today, and I have someone coming out who has a story that I think is going to touch every single heart in this room." The studio buzzed with its usual pre-interview energy. Camera operators fine-tuned their angles, sound technicians monitored audio levels, and the production crew moved with the practiced efficiency that had made Ellen's show a well-oiled machine of hope and human connection. Everything was proceeding with the polished precision that viewers had come to expect. In the green room, 28-year-old David Martinez sat quietly, cradling his 8-month-old daughter Sofia in his arms. She was a beautiful baby with dark curls and bright brown eyes that seemed to take in everything around her with curious wonder. David's hands trembled slightly as he held her, not from nervousness about being on television, but from the emotional weight of the story he was about to share with Ellen and millions of viewers. Sofia had said her first word just 3 days ago, and that single word had shattered David's world while simultaneously filling it with a kind of profound beauty he hadn't experienced since losing his wife. The word was "Mama," spoken clear as day while David was feeding her breakfast, and it had sent him into a spiral of grief and wonder that he was still trying to process. David's wife, Elena Martinez, had died during childbirth 8 months ago due to complications that no one had seen coming. One moment they were celebrating the imminent arrival of their first child, and the next David found himself holding his newborn daughter while saying goodbye to the love of his life. Elena had suffered a massive hemorrhage just minutes after Sofia's birth, and despite the medical team's heroic efforts, she had slipped away while whispering, "Tell her I love her," to David. The months that followed had been the most challenging of David's life. Learning to be a single father while grieving the loss of his soulmate felt impossible some days. There were nights when Sofia would cry inconsolably, and David would break down himself, wondering how he was supposed to raise a daughter without the woman who had dreamed of being a mother her entire life. Elena had spent months during her pregnancy talking to Sofia, reading to her, playing music for her, preparing for a life they would never get to share. But Sofia was thriving. She was a happy, healthy baby who smiled easily and seemed to radiate the same warmth that Elena had possessed. David often caught glimpses of his wife in their daughter's expressions, in the way Sofia would tilt her head when she was curious, or the way she would reach out to touch his face with the same gentle tenderness Elena had shown. The pediatrician had told David that Sofia's first word would likely come around her 8th month, and David had been both eagerly anticipating and dreading the moment. He knew that statistically most babies said mama or dada first, and he had been preparing himself emotionally for either possibility. If she said dada, he would be thrilled, but also heartbroken that Elena couldn't share the moment. If she said mama, he worried it would be too painful to bear. When the moment finally came, it was nothing like David had imagined. He had been sitting in their kitchen, feeding Sofia her morning banana puree, when she suddenly looked directly at him with those bright brown eyes and said, clear as day. Mama. But it wasn't the random babbling that pediatricians often mistake for first words. Sofia said it with intention, with purpose, as if she was calling for someone specific. And then she had looked toward the empty chair where Elena used to sit during breakfast, the chair David couldn't bring himself to move or use. The moment had overwhelmed David completely. He had started crying right there at the breakfast table, and Sofia, instead of being frightened by his tears, had reached out and touched his cheek, repeating "Mama" again, this time with what David could only describe as comfort in her voice. It was then that David realized something extraordinary was happening. Sofia had never known her mother in any traditional sense, had never heard Elena's voice except for the 9 months in the womb, had never felt her mother's arms or seen her face. But somehow, in ways that defied logical explanation, Sofia seemed to know about Elena. She seemed to be calling for a mother she had never met, but somehow remembered. A production assistant knocked gently on the green room door. "David, you and Sofia are up in just a minute. You both ready?" David looked down at Sofia, who was contentedly playing with a small toy rattle, completely unaware that she was about to make her television debut. "I think so," David replied, though ready felt like an impossible concept when you were about to share the most intimate details of your grief and wonder with the world. He had reached out to Ellen's show because he needed to share Sofia's story with someone who would understand its profound significance. Ellen had a gift for recognizing the sacred in the everyday, for helping people process emotions that felt too big to carry alone. David had been watching Ellen's show since Elena's death, finding comfort in her kindness and the way she celebrated human resilience. "Please welcome David Martinez and baby Sofia," Ellen announced, and David walked onto the stage carrying his daughter, who looked around at the bright lights and enthusiastic audience with wide-eyed fascination. The studio audience immediately melted at the sight of Sofia, who was wearing a small pink dress that Elena had bought during her pregnancy. Ellen's face lit up as she approached them, her professional warmth immediately shifting into something more personal and maternal. "Oh my goodness, look at this beautiful little girl," Ellen exclaimed, her voice softer than usual as she took in the sight of Sofia. "Hi there, sweetheart. And David, thank you so much for being here with her. How old is Sofia?" "She's 8 months old," David replied, settling into the white chair while keeping Sofia securely in his arms. She was being remarkably well behaved for a baby in such an unusual environment, almost as if she understood the importance of the moment. Ellen sat down across from them, her attention completely focused on David and Sofia. "She's absolutely gorgeous. Tell me about her." David looked down at his daughter, who was now reaching toward Ellen with curiosity. "She's everything to me. She's smart, she's happy, and she has this incredible spirit that just lights up every room she enters. She's a lot like her mother was." Ellen's expression immediately softened with understanding. "Tell me about Sofia's mom." David's voice grew thick with emotion. "Her name was Elena. She was a kindergarten teacher, and she was the most loving, kind person I've ever known. She was so excited to be a mother. She spent the entire pregnancy talking to Sofia, reading to her, playing music for her. She had all these plans, all these dreams about what they would do together." "What happened?" Ellen asked gently, though her tone suggested she already sensed the tragic direction of the story. "Elena died during childbirth," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "There were complications. She got to hold Sofia for just a few minutes before—" He paused, unable to finish the sentence. The studio fell completely silent. Even Sofia seemed to sense the gravity of the moment, looking between David and Ellen with those bright, knowing eyes. Ellen reached over and placed her hand on David's arm. "I'm so sorry, David. That must have been devastating." "It was," David agreed, wiping his eyes. "I suddenly found myself as a single father, trying to raise a daughter who would never know her mother. And I kept thinking about all the things Elena would miss. Sofia's first smile, her first laugh, her first steps, her first word. Ellen nodded, understanding where the story was heading. And did Sofia say her first word recently? David's face transformed, grief mixing with wonder, in an expression that was both heartbreaking and beautiful. She did, 3 days ago. And Ellen, this is why I needed to share this story with you, because what happened was something I can't explain, but I know Elena was involved somehow. The audience was holding its collective breath now, sensing they were about to witness something extraordinary. Sofia was having breakfast, and I was feeding her banana puree, just like every morning. And suddenly she looked right at me and said, clear as day, Mama. But it wasn't babbling, Ellen. She said it with intention, like she was calling for someone specific. Ellen felt tears beginning to form in her eyes. That must have been so emotional for you. But here's the part that gave me chills, David continued, his voice gaining strength. After she said Mama, Sofia looked toward Elena's empty chair at the breakfast table. The chair where Elena used to sit every morning. Sofia has never seen anyone sit in that chair, but somehow she knew to look there. And then she said Mama again, like she was calling for her. Ellen's hand came to her heart, and several audience members were openly crying now. David, Ellen said, her voice thick with emotion, do you think Sofia somehow knows about her mother? David looked down at Sofia, who was now reaching toward Ellen with a bright smile, completely oblivious to the profound conversation happening around her. I know it sounds impossible, but yes, I think Elena's love is so strong that it transcends death. I think Sofia feels her mother's presence, even though she never got to know her in the traditional sense. Ellen was crying openly now, no longer the polished television host, but simply a human being moved by this story of love that refused to be contained by death. David, what you're describing isn't impossible at all. Love like that, a mother's love, it doesn't end with death. It becomes part of everything around us. Sofia, as if responding to Ellen's words, suddenly looked directly at Ellen and said, clear as day, Mama? The studio fell completely silent. Ellen's eyes widened in surprise and wonder, and David looked down at his daughter with amazement. Did she just... Ellen began but couldn't finish the sentence. She did, David whispered. She just called you Mama. Ellen looked at Sofia, who was smiling at her with that bright, knowing expression, and made a decision that would define this moment forever. She stood up from her chair and gently asked, David, would it be okay if I held her for a moment? David nodded, carefully transferring Sofia into Ellen's arms. The moment Ellen held her, Sofia settled against her chest with complete trust, as if she had known Ellen her entire short life. Hi, beautiful girl, Ellen whispered to Sofia, who looked up at her with those bright brown eyes. Your mama loves you so much. She's watching over you every single day, making sure you're safe and happy and loved. Sofia responded by reaching up and touching Ellen's face, the same gesture David had described her making when he was sad. It was as if Sofia understood that Ellen was another person who needed comfort, another person who could feel her mother's love. Ellen looked directly into the camera, still holding Sofia close. Elena Martinez, wherever you are, your daughter is perfect. She's beautiful and happy and so loved, and somehow, some way, she knows you. She carries your love with her everywhere she goes. The audience rose to their feet in spontaneous applause, not because they were prompted to, but because they had witnessed something that transcended television, something that spoke to the deepest truths about love and loss and the connections that bind us together beyond death. When Ellen handed Sofia back to David, the baby looked between them both and said, Mama, one more time, as if she was blessing their connection, as if she was serving as a bridge between the world of the living and the eternal realm of love. The episode aired exactly as it happened, becoming one of the most emotionally powerful moments in Ellen Show history. The segment was shared millions of times across social media, with viewers from around the world commenting on the profound beauty of Sofia's story and the way she seemed to embody her mother's loving spirit. But for David, the real impact came in the days and weeks that followed. Sofia's appearance on Ellen's show had opened his heart to the possibility that his grief didn't have to be a burden he carried alone. The overwhelming response from viewers who shared their own stories of loss and love helped him realize that Elena's death, while tragic, had also created something beautiful. A little girl who seemed to radiate love and bring comfort to everyone she met. 6 months later, David returned to Ellen's show with Sofia, who was now walking and saying several words. But Mama remained her favorite, and she continued to say it with the same intentional love that had first captured everyone's hearts. "How are you both doing?" Ellen asked during their return visit. "We're doing really well," David replied, watching as Sofia tottered around the stage with fearless curiosity. "I've learned that grief and joy can coexist. I miss Elena every single day, but Sofia has taught me that love doesn't end with death. It just finds new ways to express itself." Sofia, hearing her name, walked over to Ellen and held up her arms to be picked up. When Ellen lifted her, Sofia pointed to the audience and said, "Mama," again, as if she recognized that all of these people were connected by love, all part of the same human family that her mother had believed in so deeply. Because sometimes a baby's first word isn't just a milestone in development. Sometimes it's a message from beyond, a reminder that the bonds between mothers and children transcend physical presence. And sometimes an 8-month-old baby can teach an entire world that love never really dies. It just learns to speak in new voices, to touch us through unexpected moments, to remind us that we are never truly alone. Elena Martinez's love lives on in every word Sofia speaks, every smile she shares, every person she touches with her inexplicable ability to bring comfort and joy. And in a television studio filled with strangers who became witnesses, a mother's love found its voice through the daughter she never got to raise, but somehow continues to guide every single day.